Story 1. Thomas Harrison Provenzano was born on June 6, 1949. He was born in the United States. His family lived in Florida. Not much is known to the public about his parents or his very early childhood. But by the time he became a young man, people started to see that Thomas was different from others. Thomas learned a trade. He became an electrician. For some time, he worked as an electrician. But later in his life, he was not working. He was unemployed. He did not have a job. In the early 1970s, something changed inside Thomas. He began to believe things that were not real. He told people that he was Jesus Christ. This was not a joke to him. He truly believed this with all his heart. This belief started when he was in his early 20s. He kept this belief for many years. It did not go away. Thomas also had problems with his temper. He could become very angry. He would focus on things that upset him and not let them go. He held on to his anger for a long time. He also made threats against people he did not like. He would say he was going to hurt them or kill them. On August 1st, 1983, the police arrested Thomas. 2 officers from the Orlando Police Department arrested him. Their names were Officer Shirley and Officer Epperson. The charge was disorderly conduct. This means he was acting in a way that disturbed the peace. This arrest made Thomas very angry. He did not forget about it. He thought about it every day. From the day of his arrest until the next year, Thomas followed the 2 officers. He watched them. He kept showing up where they were. He also kept saying he would kill them. He made these threats many times. The officers knew he was angry. But at that time, no one stopped him. Thomas also started buying weapons. He bought a .38 caliber revolver. That is a type of handgun. He bought a 12-gauge shotgun. That is a long gun used for hunting or shooting. He bought a .45 caliber semi-automatic weapon. That is a powerful gun that can fire many bullets quickly. He also bought ammunition, which are the bullets for these guns. Thomas planned how to carry these weapons without people seeing them. He had special pockets sewn into the inside lining of his jacket. The jacket was large and looked like an army-style jacket. The hidden pockets allowed him to put the guns inside his coat. From the outside, no one could tell he was armed. By the end of 1983, Thomas Provenzano was an unemployed electrician who believed he was Jesus Christ. He was very angry at 2 police officers. He owned multiple guns and ammunition, and he had a coat with secret pockets to hide his weapons. He was waiting for the right time to act. Thomas Provenzano had a court date. He was supposed to appear in the Orange County Courthouse for his disorderly conduct trial. The trial was about the arrest from August 1st, 1983. He arrived at the courthouse on January 9th, 1984. That was one day too early. He wore black combat boots, army fatigue pants, a long olive drab army coat, a red bandana, and a shoulder bag. A courthouse worker told him he came on the wrong day. Thomas left without causing any trouble that day. The next morning was January 10th, 1984. Thomas came back to the courthouse. This time he arrived early in the day. He was wearing the same large army-style jacket. But inside that jacket, he had hidden 3 weapons. He had the 12-gauge shotgun. He had the .45 caliber assault rifle. And he had the .38 caliber revolver. All 3 guns were loaded with live ammunition. He also carried a knapsack. Inside the knapsack were more bullets and a gun stock for the .45 caliber weapon. People in the courthouse heard Thomas talking to himself. He was muttering threats. He said, "I can't wait until those 2 policemen walk in. I'll show them." He also said, "I'm going to do it. This is where these guys get their ass kicked." He was talking about Officers Shirley and Epperson, the 2 men who had arrested him 5 months earlier. Thomas believed today was the day he would hurt them. Thomas walked into Judge Concer's courtroom at about 9:30 in the morning. A bailiff named Mark Parker stopped him at the door. Mark Parker was a correctional officer. He was only 19 years old. He had been working this job for just 4 months. Parker told Thomas that he would have to leave the knapsack outside or let the officers search it. Thomas did not want the knapsack searched because it contained ammunition. So Thomas took the knapsack back to his car. He left it there. Thomas returned to the courtroom at 10:15 in the morning. He did not have the knapsack this time, but he still had all 3 hidden guns inside his coat. His case was called. He walked up to the judge's bench. Judge Concert told Thomas to go back to the spectator area and wait for his lawyer to arrive. Then Judge Concert gave an order. He told a bailiff named Harry Dalton to search Thomas. Harry Dalton was 53 years old. He was a father of 6 children. Dalton was a friendly man. He walked toward Thomas and said, "I'm going to have to search you. I'm your friend." At the same time, Correctional Officer Mark Parker left the courtroom and then came back in. Parker stood behind Thomas. Thomas reached his hand into his pocket. Bailiff Dalton tried to grab him. That is when Thomas pulled out a gun and shot Harry Dalton in the face. As he fired, Thomas screamed, "You're not my friend, motherfucker." Harry Dalton fell to the ground. He was badly wounded. The bullet caused severe brain damage. He was also partially paralyzed. He did not die right away, but he would never walk or talk normally again. Thomas then chased Mark Parker. He fired at least 2 shots at Parker. Parker ran to get help, but as Parker ran, he was caught in the middle of the shooting. Thomas fired a bullet that hit Parker in the spine. The spine is the bundle of nerves in the back that allows a person to move their arms and legs. The bullet cut through Parker's spine. He fell to the ground. He could not move his arms. He could not move his legs. He was paralyzed from the neck down. He was only 19 years old. Everyone inside the courtroom ran for cover. They hid under desks and behind walls. The sound of gunshots was very loud. People in the next courtroom heard the noise. That courtroom belonged to Judge Coleman. A bailiff named William Arnie Wilkerson was in charge of that courtroom. William Wilkerson was 60 years old. He had retired from the United States Navy 14 years earlier. He had reached the rank of lieutenant commander. Now he worked as a bailiff. Wilkerson heard the gunfire. He left Judge Coleman's courtroom and walked into the hallway where the shooting was happening. He wanted to stop Thomas or help the wounded. Thomas saw Wilkerson. Thomas raised his gun and fired. The bullet hit William Wilkerson. Wilkerson fell to the floor. He died right there. He was the first person to be killed by Thomas that day. Thomas did not stop. He continued shooting and running through the hallway. He took a military stance in a corner. That means he stood like a soldier ready to fight. He held his weapon and yelled, "I'm going to kill you, motherfucker. I'm going to kill all of you." Then Thomas ran into a room numbered 436. This room was a lunchroom for bailiffs. He went inside and took cover. He pointed his shotgun out the door into the hallway. He was ready to shoot anyone who came near. A corporal from the Orange County Sheriff's Office heard the chaos. His name was A.C. Jacobs. Corporal Jacobs saw Thomas inside the lunchroom. Jacobs went to a window. He aimed his gun through the window and shot Thomas in the back. The bullet hit Thomas. He fell to the ground. He was hurt but still alive. The shooting stopped because Thomas could no longer fight back. Police officers and security personnel rushed in. They took the guns away from Thomas. They found the shotgun, the assault rifle, and the revolver all still loaded. They arrested him right there in the courthouse. When the shooting was over, 3 men were hurt. William Wilkerson was dead. Harry Dalton had a gunshot wound to the head. He had brain damage and was partly paralyzed. Mark Parker was shot in the spine. He could not move his body from the neck down. Thomas Provenzano was wounded in the back, but alive. Other people in the courthouse had seen and heard everything. Some had watched Thomas mutter threats before the shooting. Others had seen him pull out the gun and fire. But at this moment, no arrests had been made beyond taking Thomas into custody. No trial had happened yet. No one had been convicted. The police simply held Thomas at the scene. After the shooting stopped, Thomas Provenzano was taken to a hospital. Doctors treated the bullet wound in his back. He survived. When he was healthy enough, he was moved to jail. The police did not need to search for clues because the crime happened in front of many witnesses. Dozens of people in the courthouse saw Thomas shoot the guns. The weapons were found next to him. The bullets were matched to those guns. The case against him was very strong. Thomas was formally charged with 1 count of first-degree murder for killing William Wilkerson. He was also charged with 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder for shooting Harry Dalton and Mark Parker. The state of Florida decided to seek the death penalty for the murder of Wilkerson. The trial took place in 1984. The jury heard from witnesses who were in the courthouse that day. They saw the bloody clothes. They saw the guns. They heard Thomas's own threats, which other people had repeated in court. The jury did not take a long time to decide. They found Thomas Provenzano guilty of first-degree murder and guilty of both attempted murder charges. After the guilt phase, the same jury had to decide if Thomas should receive the death penalty or life in prison. The jury voted to recommend the death sentence. The trial judge agreed with the jury. The judge sentenced Thomas to death for killing William Wilkerson. For the 2 attempted murders, the judge gave Thomas 2 consecutive 30-year prison sentences. That meant he would serve 30 years for shooting Harry Dalton and then 30 more years for shooting Mark Parker, one after the other. Thomas appealed his case. An appeal means he asked a higher court to look for mistakes in his trial. In 1986, the Florida Supreme Court reviewed the case. The court found no errors. They affirmed the conviction and the death sentence. That meant the sentence was approved. For the next several years, Thomas sat on death row at Florida State Prison in Stark. He filed more appeals. His lawyers argued many things. One of the main arguments was about his mental health. Thomas still believed he was Jesus Christ. His lawyers said he was too mentally ill to be executed. Under Florida law, a person cannot be executed if they do not understand that they are about to die and why they are dying. The lawyers said Thomas did not truly understand because his mind was sick. In December 1999, a trial judge looked at this issue. The judge agreed that Thomas believed he was Jesus Christ. Thomas thought he was being executed because people hated Jesus. But the judge also found that Thomas knew he had killed William Wilkerson. He knew he had shot Harry Dalton and Mark Parker. He knew the state was going to kill him for those acts. Under Florida law, that was enough. The judge ruled that Thomas was mentally ill but still competent to be executed. In 1999 and 2000, Governor Jeb Bush signed death warrants for Thomas. A death warrant is a legal paper that sets an execution date. Several times, the execution was scheduled and then delayed. One delay happened because of another execution. A man named Alan Lee Davis was executed in the electric chair on July 8, 1999. That execution was very bloody. The Florida Supreme Court stopped all executions for a short time to review if the electric chair was cruel and unusual. Thomas received a stay because of that review. Later, Florida changed from the electric chair to lethal injection. Lethal injection means the person is given drugs through a needle in the arm. The drugs stop the heart. Thomas was scheduled to be the 4th person executed by lethal injection in Florida. On June 20, 2000, Thomas was scheduled to die at 6 o'clock in the evening. But the United States Court of Appeals in Atlanta gave him a last-minute reprieve. That meant they stopped the execution. The needles had already been placed in his arms. The prison officials were told to stop. The next day, June 21, 2000, the same court lifted the stay. They did not explain why. The execution was rescheduled for that evening. At 6 p.m. on June 21, 2000, there was another delay. Thomas's lawyer, Michael Ryder, sent a request to the Florida Supreme Court. He said Thomas's mental condition had gotten worse. He asked for time to have psychiatrists examine Thomas again. The Florida Supreme Court denied the request at 6:44 p.m. 8 minutes later, the execution began. Thomas looked at his lawyer and said, "Thanks for everything, Mike." The drugs were injected. His face turned bright red. He moved his feet back and forth. He puffed his lips. Then his heart stopped. His face turned grayish purple. At 7 p.m., Thomas Harrison Provenzano was pronounced dead. He was 51 years old. He had spent more than 16 years on death row. Mark Parker watched the execution from his wheelchair. He was 36 years old at that time. He had been paralyzed from the neck down since the shooting. He said, "I was happy to get it over with. He got off better than the other two victims did. I'm still going to be paralyzed in the morning when I wake up." Harry Dalton had died 7 years before the execution. He never recovered from the brain damage and paralysis caused by the gunshot wound to his face. He passed away in 1991. William Wilkerson's niece, Kathy Parlin, stood outside the prison during the execution. She said the long appeals process made everyone suffer more. She was frustrated that it took 16 years. Thomas's sister, Catherine Forbes, asked Governor Bush to spare her brother. She said Thomas was severely mentally ill. The governor did not stop the execution. The courts had ruled that Thomas was fit to die under Florida law. The story of Thomas Provenzano ends with 3 victims. One man killed in the courthouse, a second man who died years later from his wounds, and a third man who remains paralyzed for the rest of his life. Story 2. Gary Lee Graham was born on September 5, 1963. He was born in Houston, Texas. His mother had a nervous condition. The family called it a mental illness. Because of this condition, his mother was often sent to hospitals. She went to the hospital many times. According to his grandmother, she was hospitalized at least 20 times. When Gary was about 3 years old, he went to live with his grandmother, Irma Cron. He stayed with her because his mother could not take care of him. His mother would come out of the hospital, and then Gary would live with her again for a while. Then she would go back to the hospital, and Gary would go back to his grandmother. This went on for several years. He lived with his grandmother on and off during his early childhood. Gary attended school while living with his grandmother. He also went to church regularly. His grandmother later said that he loved the Lord. She also said that he did not give her any problems or trouble. He was not violent at that time. He did not carry weapons. His grandmother described him as a child who behaved well. When Gary was around 11 or 12 years old, he went to live with his father. After that, he stayed with his father. He did not live with his mother or grandmother on a regular basis anymore. Gary's mother was still sick. She remained in and out of hospitals for many years. Gary saw his mother when he could. He would visit her at the home of his stepfather, Joe Samby. Samby married Gary's mother when Gary was about 15 years old. Samby said that Gary came by the house once or twice a week to see his mother. Samby described Gary as a young man who had real respect for his mother. He said Gary cared about her and was close to her. Gary would help around the house when asked. He would cut the grass. He would clean up. He would help his mother. Samby said Gary was always nice and respectable to him. Samby never knew Gary to be a violent person. Gary had 2 children of his own by the time he was 17. He had a son and a daughter. He bought clothes for his children. He tried to give them food. There is no clear record that he was married to the mother of his children, but later a woman named Mary Brown became his girlfriend. She would later become his wife. Gary went to school but did not finish his education with any advanced degree. He worked with his father for some time. His stepfather did not know exactly what kind of work Gary did. He just knew that Gary worked with his father. As a teenager, Gary began to get into trouble. He started committing smaller crimes. By age 17, He had already developed a pattern of theft and robbery. People who knew him in the community said his reputation for being peaceful and law-abiding was bad. That information came from a Texas Youth Council employee. She did not give specific details, but she stated that his reputation was not good. Gary also used marijuana. He would use drugs before or during some of his illegal activities. This habit started while he was still a minor. By the spring of 1981, Gary was 17 years old. He was 5 feet and 9 inches tall. He weighed about 145 pounds. He was thin. He was living in Houston, Texas. He had a girlfriend, but he did not stay with her regularly. He spent time on the streets. He had access to guns. He carried a pistol and sometimes a sawed-off shotgun. His grandmother later remembered that Gary was never violent and never had weapons. But that memory did not match what Gary was actually doing by age 17. By May 1981, Gary had already begun to rob people. He did not have a steady job. He did not go to school regularly. He spent his time looking for victims. Gary had no adult supervision at this point. His father may have been present, but Gary was mostly on his own. His mother was too sick to control him. His grandmother lived separately. Gary was free to come and go as he pleased. In the months before May 1981, Gary had told at least one person that he had killed people. He bragged about it. He said he had killed 6 people already. He said this to a robbery victim named Richard Sanford. He also said similar things to a woman he later kidnapped and raped. He told her that he had killed 3 people and that he would kill her too. Gary did not show fear of the police. He did not show regret for his actions. He believed he would not get caught. He told one victim that if he got caught, he would burn, meaning he would accept the death penalty. He said he was not planning to get caught. By the middle of May 1981, Gary Graham was a 17-year-old young man with a history of instability at home, an ill mother, no steady guidance, a growing drug habit, access to guns, and a willingness to threaten and hurt strangers. He had already committed several robberies. He had already shot at least one person. He had bragged about killing multiple people. He was living day to day in Houston, moving from place to place, looking for money and opportunities to steal. He had no job. He had no fixed schedule. He had no one telling him to stop. And he was about to begin a week of violence that would change many lives forever. On the evening of May 13th, 1981, Gary Graham went to a Safeway grocery store in North Houston, Texas. He entered the store first. He walked around inside. Then he left the store before his victim came out. He waited in the parking lot. At about 9:35 p.m., a man named Bobby Grant Lambert came out of the Safeway. He was 53 years old. He was white. He was carrying a bag of groceries. Graham approached him. He tried to grab Lambert's wallet. Lambert resisted. He pushed back. The 2 men struggled briefly. Then Graham pulled out a pistol. He pointed it at Lambert's chest. From a distance of about 2 or 3 feet, he shot Lambert once. The bullet hit Lambert in the heart. Lambert fell to the ground. He died there in the parking lot. Graham ran away. He did not take the wallet. He got away with only the change from a $100 bill that came out during the struggle. There were witnesses in the parking lot. One woman named Bernadine Skillern was sitting in her car. She saw the whole thing. She saw the gunman turn and look at her when she blew her car horn. She saw his face clearly for about 1.5 minutes. Other witnesses also saw a young, thin black male running away. They described him as medium height to tall, but not all of them saw his face clearly. That night, Graham got away. No one caught him at the scene. He kept his gun. He did not stop. The very next day, May 14th, 1981, Graham began a series of new crimes. He robbed more people. He used either a pistol or a sawed-off shotgun each time. He pointed the gun directly at his victims. He took their money, their wallets, and sometimes their cars. On May 14th, he robbed one victim. On May 15th, he robbed more victims. On May 16th, he robbed again. On May 18th, he robbed again. On May 19th, he robbed again. On May 20th, he robbed again. In total, over these 6 days, he robbed 13 different victims at 9 different locations around Houston. During these robberies, Graham did not only take property, he also hurt people. He pistol whipped 2 of his victims. That means he hit them in the head or face with the handle of his gun. One of those victims was shot in the neck. That man survived but was seriously wounded. Another victim was a 64-year-old man. Graham tried to steal the man's vehicle. When the man resisted, Graham struck him with the vehicle. He used the car as a weapon. On May 16th, Graham committed a robbery that turned into an attempted murder. A man named David Spears was having trouble with his car. Graham offered to give him a lift. Spears got into Graham's car. Then Graham tried to rob him. He pulled out a sawed-off shotgun. He shot Spears in the thigh. The wound was severe. Spears nearly lost his leg. He could not walk without help for 2 years. Before shooting him, Graham said he would go back to kill Spears' fiancée and her parents. He said he would rape the fiancée first. On another day during that week, Graham shot a second man. The victim's name was Greg Jones. Graham shot him in the throat. Then he left him for dead. Jones survived, but the bullet caused serious injury. Graham also stole 5 vehicles during this week. He would take the car or truck from his victim after pointing a gun at them. On May 20th, Graham committed his worst crime aside from the murder. He approached a 57-year-old woman named Lisa Blackburn. She was a taxi driver or was working at a gas station. He kidnapped her. He forced her to go with him to a vacant place. There he repeatedly raped her. He hit her in the face. When she told him she was 60 years old to try to stop him, he said, "Don't lie." He said he was going to have sex with her in her ears and eyes and every place else. She screamed from the pain. He only stopped when she screamed. After raping her, Graham took her to her own apartment. He took her valuables. He fired a gun into the walls of her apartment. Then he got undressed. He fell asleep. During the 5 hours that he held her captive, Graham kept talking to her. He said, "I have already killed 3 people, and I'm going to kill you." He also said, "I've killed 3 people, and I'm going to kill you." He told her she did not mean anything to him. He said he did not plan to get caught. He said if he got caught, he would burn. Earlier in the week, during a robbery of a man named Richard Sanford, Graham also bragged. He told Sanford that he had killed 6 other people already. He said if Sanford wanted to be number 7, he should do something stupid. Graham committed all these crimes while he was 17 years old. He carried his pistol or sawed-off shotgun openly. He acted alone on most of these occasions. Sometimes he had an accomplice nearby, but Graham was the one holding the weapon. By the end of May 20th, 1981, Graham had committed 1 murder, at least 10 aggravated robberies, 2 shootings that could have been murders, 1 kidnapping, and 1 rape. He had stolen 5 cars. He had threatened to kill multiple people. He had shown no regret. He fell asleep in the apartment of the woman he had raped. She saw his gun nearby. She took the gun. She then called the police. The police arrived at the apartment while Graham was still asleep. The woman Graham had kidnapped and raped, Lisa Blackburn, waited until he fell asleep in her apartment. She then took his gun. She called the police. Officers arrived at the apartment while Graham was still asleep. They arrested him on the spot. That was May 20th, 1981. After the arrest, police searched Graham and his belongings. They found a .22 caliber pistol. They also found other evidence linking him to multiple robberies and shootings. Police then began connecting Graham to the crimes committed between May 13th and May 20th. The police already had reports of the murder of Bobby Lambert on May 13th. They had descriptions from witnesses. On May 26, 1981, police showed a photo array to Bernadine Skillern, the woman who had seen the killer's face clearly in the Safeway parking lot. She looked at the photos. She picked out Gary Graham's picture. She said his features matched except that the skin tone in the photo looked different. She said she needed to see him in person to be sure. The next day, May 27, 1981, police held a live lineup. Graham stood in the lineup with other men. Bernadine Skillern came to the police station. She looked at the lineup. She immediately and positively identified Gary Graham as the man who shot Bobby Lambert. She had no doubt. Other witnesses also viewed the lineup. Some could not make an identification, but Skillern's identification was clear and unwavering. Police also took statements from other victims. David Spears, who had been shot in the thigh, identified Graham from his hospital bed. Greg Jones, who had been shot in the throat, also identified Graham. Multiple robbery victims picked Graham out of photo arrays or lineups. In total, 19 eyewitnesses positively identified Graham as the perpetrator of the various crimes. Graham was formally charged with the capital murder of Bobby Lambert. He was also charged with multiple aggravated robberies. He went to trial in October 1981 in Harris County, Texas. At the guilt phase of the trial, the prosecution presented Bernadine Skillern as its key witness. She testified that she saw Graham shoot Lambert. She described the parking lot lighting as good. She said she saw Graham's face full on 3 times, for 2 to 3 seconds each time, and observed him for 60 to 90 seconds total. She pointed to Graham in the courtroom. Other witnesses testified about the crime scene. The defense argued mistaken identity. The defense did not present any alibi witnesses. Graham did not testify. The jury found Gary Graham guilty of capital murder. The vote was unanimous, 12-0. The verdict came in October 1981. Then came the punishment phase. The prosecution presented evidence of Graham's other crimes from May 14th to May 20th, 1981. They showed that he had committed 10 aggravated robberies, 2 shootings, 1 kidnapping, and 1 rape. They showed he had bragged about killing 6 people. They showed he had threatened to kill more. The defense presented Graham's stepfather and grandmother, who said he had been a good child and was not violent. They argued he was young and could change. The jury answered all 3 special questions required under Texas law. They found that Graham acted deliberately. They found that there was a probability he would commit future violent acts and be a continuing threat to society. They found that his conduct was not reasonable in response to any provocation. The jury then sentenced Gary Graham to death. The sentence was formally imposed on November 9, 1981, when he was received into the Texas Department of Corrections. Graham did not stop fighting the sentence. Over the next 19 years, he filed many appeals. He argued that the eyewitness identification was wrong. He claimed he was innocent of Lambert's murder. He said his trial lawyer did not do a good job. He presented new witnesses who said he was elsewhere on the night of May 13, 1981. But the courts reviewed these claims. A state district judge held a hearing in 1988. The judge found the alibi witnesses were not credible. They had contradicted themselves and each other. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals reviewed his case multiple times. Federal courts also reviewed his case, including the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit and the U.S. Supreme Court. In total, his case was reviewed by at least 33 different judges in more than 20 appeals. None of these courts found that he was innocent. None overturned his conviction. In 1993, Texas Governor and Richards granted Graham a 30-day stay of execution. That was the only reprieve he ever received. After that, no governor could give another stay because the law allowed only 1 per inmate. Over the years, Graham changed his name to Shaka Sankofa. He wrote for a prison newspaper. He gained support from anti-death penalty activists, including celebrities and religious leaders. They held protests. They said he was innocent. They said the death penalty was racist. But the courts did not agree. On June 22, 2000, Gary Graham was scheduled to be executed by lethal injection at the Walls Unit in Huntsville, Texas. On that day, the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles voted 14-3 against a reprieve. They voted 12-5 against commuting his sentence to life. They voted 17-0 against a pardon. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals and the U.S. Supreme Court both rejected his final appeals. The Supreme Court vote was 5-4 against stopping the execution. Before the execution, Graham fought the guards who took him from death row. He refused meals. He was strapped to the gurney with extra restraints. He made a long final statement. He said he was innocent. He said he was being lynched. He called the death penalty a holocaust for black people. He asked to be called Shaka Sankofa. The execution proceeded. Gary Lee Graham, also known as Shaka Sankofa, was pronounced dead at 8:59 p.m. on June 22, 2000. He was 36 years old. He had spent 19 years on death row. After the execution, the family of Bobby Lambert said they believed justice had been served. Bernadine Skillern, the eyewitness, said she felt relief. She said she had seen Graham kill Lambert and that nothing would ever change that. The other victims of Graham's crime spree, including those he shot and the woman he raped, were finally able to close that chapter of their lives. Gary Graham was the 648th person executed in the United States since 1976, and the 222nd person executed in Texas since that year. The story ends with Graham's death by lethal injection, his guilt affirmed by every court that reviewed his case, and his victims left to live with the memories of what he did to them. Story 3. Bert Leroy Hunter was born on March 7, 1947, in Stillwell, Oklahoma. Stillwell is a small town in the eastern part of the state, near the Ozark Mountains. The area was poor and rural. Bert did not have an easy start in life. When Bert was only 3 years old, his mother died. She died from a medical condition called fecal impaction. This means her intestines became blocked, and it caused her death. Bert was too young to fully understand what happened, but losing his mother changed his life completely. After his mother died, Bert and his younger sister went to live with their grandparents. His grandparents had already raised 13 children of their own. They lived in the Cookson Hills area of Oklahoma. The family was very poor. Bert's grandfather was abusive. He treated Bert harshly. There was no kindness in that home. Bert grew up in extreme poverty. When he went to school, other children teased him because he was poor. They laughed at him when he ate his lunch. His lunch was often just cold biscuits and jelly. The other kids had better food, and they made fun of him for it. This happened day after day. Bert felt ashamed and alone. He had no mother to protect him. His grandfather did not care for him gently. The people around him were rough. The area where he lived was known for gangsters and criminals. It was not a safe or happy place to grow up. Bert did not finish much school. He got a GED later, but as a young man he had no direction. He started getting into trouble with the law when he was still a teenager. On March 27, 1964, when Bert was 17 years old, he pleaded guilty to burglary. He was sentenced to 2 years in the Missouri Department of Corrections. He went to prison for the first time as a young man. On September 19, 1965, soon after getting out, he pleaded guilty to 2 more crimes: stealing, a felony, and escape. He was sentenced to 4 years for stealing and 2 years for escape. The sentences were set to run at the same time. He went back to prison. Bert did not learn from these punishments. On June 16, 1968, he was involved in a robbery at a tavern in Amazonia, Missouri. Amazonia is a small town in Andrew County. The owner of the tavern was a legally blind man. During the robbery, Bert acted with another person. That other person shot and killed the tavern owner. Bert did not pull the trigger, but he was there. He He was part of the robbery. Under the law at that time, that made him guilty of murder. On December 15th, 1969, Burt was sentenced to life in prison for first-degree murder. He was 22 years old. He went to prison for a killing that happened during a robbery. While serving that life sentence, Burt learned new skills. He taught himself data processing and computer programming. Prison had programs that helped inmates learn trades. Burt was smart. He picked up the skills quickly. He became good with computers. He spent about 11 years in prison for that murder. Then, in 1980, he was released on parole. He had served his time and was now free. After his release, Burt got a job with the Missouri Department of Revenue. He worked as a computer programmer. In fact, the software he wrote for car license plates was still being used years later. People at work knew he had been in prison for murder, but he got along well with his co-workers. His supervisor said Burt worked better with the staff than he did. Burt was skilled and useful. At some point, Burt got married. His wife's name was Deanna. They lived in Missouri for a while. Burt wanted to improve his life and make more money. In 1982, Burt and his wife moved to Florida. He had found a job as a software engineer for a company that made handheld computers. The job paid well, over $40,000 per year. That was a good salary at that time. Burt was doing better than he ever had before. However, in 1987, Deanna's father died. This was a traumatic event for her. She became unhappy living in Florida. She missed her home state, so she decided to move back to Missouri. Burt tried to convince her to stay in Florida with him. She refused. The separation from his wife hurt Burt deeply. After Deanna left, Burt began to fall apart. He started using cocaine. At first it was small amounts, but soon he was using more and more. The drug cost him a lot of money. His work began to suffer. He would not show up for days at a time. His employers kept him on for 7 months without him writing a single line of code. But eventually his cocaine use became too much. In 1988, while still in Florida, Burt tried to kill himself. He took a .22 caliber pistol and put it to his head. He pulled the trigger. The gun fired, but he did not die. The bullet only gave him a powder burn on his forehead. The burn later turned into a dark mark on his skin. He could not even kill himself properly. On October 21, 1985, before the suicide attempt, Burt had received a suspended sentence in Florida for aggravated battery. He was put on 7 years of probation. That meant he was still under supervision. His cocaine use and his suicide attempt put that probation at risk. Burt was now deeply depressed. He had lost his wife. He was addicted to cocaine. He could not keep his job. He had a felony record and was on probation. He felt worthless. He had no hope for the future. He told people that his life was not worth living. His roommate in Florida started pushing him out. The roommate got a girlfriend. Burt felt alone. He decided to rob his roommate. He staged a fake robbery with an old partner from Jefferson City. They took cocaine and some possessions. Then Burt fled Florida and drove back to Missouri. He came back to Missouri in late 1988. He needed money. He needed to report to his parole officer in Florida, but he had no job. He tried to sell the cocaine he had stolen, but the cocaine was poor quality. The person who agreed to sell it for him could not get the money. Burt was desperate. He had been a successful computer programmer. He had made good money. Now he was broke, addicted to drugs, and separated from his wife. His mind was not clear. He was angry and scared. He felt that he had nothing left to lose. This was the state of Burt Hunter's life in December 1988. He was 41 years old. He had a long criminal record. He had served time for murder before. He had tried to kill himself. He was using cocaine heavily. He was in serious financial trouble, and he was about to take actions that would lead to more deaths. On the afternoon of December 15, 1988, Burt Hunter was in Jefferson City, Missouri. He had driven there from Florida not long before. He needed money. His cocaine habit had cost him his job. He was behind on his car payments. He had to report to his parole officer in Florida, but he had no income to show. Bert had heard that a man named Richard Hodges kept large amounts of cash in a file cabinet in his home. The home was on Boonville Road in Jefferson City. Bert believed this rumor was true. He thought he could get money quickly by robbing Richard Hodges. Bert did not act alone. He had an accomplice named Tomas Irvin. Bert and Tomas Irvin had met each other before. Both men had been in prison for murder. They knew each other from the Missouri prison system. Irvin had been paroled as well. The two men stayed in contact after their release. Bert and Irvin made a plan. They would go to Richard Hodges' home. Bert would knock on the door. He would carry a pistol in his pocket. Irvin would help tie up the victims. They would take the cash and any valuables. Then they would leave. Bert put a stocking mask in his pocket. He also brought duct tape. Duct tape is strong tape that can be used to bind a person's hands and feet. He brought plastic bags as well. The plastic bags would later be used for a different purpose. They drove to the Hodges home. Bert got out of the car. He walked to the front door. He had the pistol in one pocket and the stocking mask in the other. Irvin waited nearby or followed behind. The two men moved together. Bert knocked on the door. A woman answered. Her name was Mildred Hodges. She was 75 years old. Mildred was Richard Hodges' mother. She lived with her son. She had just returned home after heart surgery. Her health was very fragile. As soon as Mildred opened the door, Bert pulled the stocking mask down over his face. He took out the pistol and showed it to her. He grabbed her by the hand and forced his way inside the house. Mildred became very scared. She cried out for her son. She shouted his name. Richard Hodges heard his mother scream. Richard was 49 years old. He came into the room where Bert was holding his mother. Richard saw the masked man with a gun. He saw his elderly mother being grabbed. Richard asked Bert and Irvin to leave his mother alone. He told them she was in poor health. She had just had heart surgery. He begged them not to hurt her. While Richard was trying to calm his mother, Bert and Irvin began to act. They took the duct tape. They started binding Mildred's hands and feet with the tape. She could not fight back. She was old and weak. When her hands and feet were taped, they took her to a back bedroom. They put her on a bed. She was left there for a moment. Irvin then went back to the living room. He took Richard and made him lie down on the floor. Irvin started taping Richard's hands together. While Irvin did this, Bert was walking through the house. He was searching for money and valuables. He looked in drawers, closets, and cabinets. He was looking for the cash he believed was kept in a file cabinet. But something went wrong. Mildred Hodges did not stay on the bed. Even though she was old and her hands and feet were taped, she managed to free herself. She wiggled and worked at the tape until she got loose. Then she got up from the bed. She ran out of the bedroom and into the living room. Mildred ran straight at Irvin. Irvin was still on the floor, taping Richard's hands. Mildred reached out and grabbed Irvin's stocking mask. She pulled it off his face. When she did this, Irvin lost his balance. He fell back onto the floor. His face was now uncovered. Mildred had seen who he was. As Irvin fell, he called out Bert's first name. He shouted, "Bert." He did this without thinking. He was surprised and scared. But by calling out Bert's name, he let Mildred and Richard hear that name. Now the victims knew that one of the attackers was named Bert. They had also seen Irvin's face. Bert heard Irvin call his name. He came running from the other part of the house. He entered the living room. He saw that Irvin's mask was off. He realized that Mildred had seen Irvin's face and heard his name. This changed everything. Bert and Irvin made a quick decision. They looked at each other. They both understood that if the victims could identify them, they would be caught. Mildred and Richard could go to the police. They could describe Irvin's face. They could say Bert's name. The two men decided that both victims had to be killed. Mildred tried to run away. She turned and fled into the hallway. Bert and Irvin chased her. They caught her in the hallway. They forced her down to the floor. As she fell, her head hit the wall. Her nose started to bleed. The impact knocked the breath out of her. She became still. She was not moving. Bert later said that a rush of air came out of her mouth, and then she went quiet. He did not know if she was dead or just unconscious. But he did not check right away. He and Irvin went back to the living room. They finished securing Richard Hodges. They put more duct tape over his mouth. They taped his nose as well. Then they took plastic bags. They placed plastic bags over the heads of both victims. Bert admitted later that he held Richard's nose shut through the plastic bag. He held it until Richard could not breathe. He suffocated him. While Bert was dealing with Richard, Irvin was with Mildred. Irvin came back to Bert and said he thought Mildred was already dead. Bert went to check her. He put his fingers on her neck to feel for a pulse. He found no pulse. Her heart had stopped. She was dead. The two men then finished searching the house. They took valuable items. They found a 2-carat diamond ring. They found fur coats, including a full-length sable coat. They took some alcohol. They took about $15 or $16 in cash. They did not find the large amount of money they had expected. The rumor about cash in the file cabinet was false. After they finished, they left the house. But they did not leave the bodies inside. They came back later. They put Richard Hodges' body into a garbage bag. They took the body away from the house. They disposed of it somewhere in Jefferson City. The exact location was later found by police. Mildred Hodges' body was left inside the home. She was still on the floor or on the bed. The reports differ. But she was found in the house. At least once more that evening or the next night, Bert and Irvin returned to the house. They may have come back to remove Mildred's body as well, but they did not succeed. One source says they tried to move her, but the body had started to decay and gases were released, making Bert sick. So they left her there. The two men then fled. They took Richard Hodges' car, a Lincoln, and later abandoned it. They got a rental car and committed a robbery in Paducah, Kentucky. That rental car was later burned. Bert eventually returned to Florida. He thought he had gotten away with the murders. The victims were Mildred Hodges, 75 years old, and her son Richard Hodges, 49 years old. Mildred had just come home from the hospital after heart surgery. Richard was her only son. They lived together. They were not criminals. They had no connection to Bert Hunter except through a drug deal that went bad. But Bert later gave different versions of that story. What is clear from the court records is this. On December 15, 1988, Bert Hunter and Tomas Irvin forced their way into the Hodges home, robbed them, and then suffocated them with plastic bags over their heads because Mildred pulled off Irvin's mask and Irvin called out Bert's name. The method of death for both victims was suffocation. The medical examiner later confirmed that Richard Hodges died from compression of the neck. Mildred Hodges died from heart disease that was triggered during the assault. But the cause of death listed in the case was suffocation by plastic bags. No one called the police immediately after the crime. The bodies were not found right away. The discovery would come later. But at this moment, after the killings, Bert Hunter believed he had covered his tracks. He did not know that Mildred Hodges had done one small thing before she died. Before he and Irvin entered the house, before she was taped and taken to the bedroom, Mildred had looked out a window. She saw Irvin's car. She wrote down the license plate number on a notepad. That small act would later lead police to Bert Hunter. The first clue came from Mildred Hodges herself. Before Bert Hunter and Tomas Irvin forced their way into her home, she had looked out a window. She saw a car outside. She did not know who the car belonged to, but she wrote down the license plate number on a notepad. She did this because she was cautious. After she was killed, that notepad remained in the house. When the police later searched the Hodges home, they found the notepad. The top page had been written on. The writing was faint or incomplete. But the police used a technique called shading. They rubbed a pencil or other tool over the next page to reveal the indentation from the writing on the previous page. This showed the license plate number that Mildred had written down. The number belonged to Tomas Irvin's car. This was the first break in the case. The police now had a name connected to a car. They started looking for Tomas Irvin. Meanwhile, Richard Hodges' body had been disposed of in Jefferson City. Police found his body. When they found Richard, they went to his home on Boonville Road. Inside the house, they found Mildred Hodges' body. Both bodies had plastic bags over their heads. The medical examiner confirmed they died of suffocation. The police collected evidence from the scene. They found duct tape. They found the plastic bags. They also found hair samples. One hair found at the crime scene did not match Bert Hunter or Tomas Irvin. That hair belonged to an unknown third person. But the police did not pursue that lead heavily at the time. The license plate number led police to Irvin. Once police started questioning Irvin, he gave them information. Irvin led the police to Bert Hunter. Hunter was arrested at his parole office in Florida. Police body slammed him and took him into custody. He was brought back to Missouri to face charges. On March 28, 1989, a grand jury in Cole County, Missouri, indicted Bert Hunter on 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of first-degree robbery. At the time of his arrest, Hunter was on parole for the 1968 murder in Amazonia. That meant he was already a convicted murderer who had been released and then committed new murders. Hunter was placed in jail to wait for his trial. The conditions were harsh. He was kept in solitary confinement. His cell was very small, just a twin bed and a tiny window. He could leave his cell only 1 hour every other day. He had no phone, no radio, no television. He tried to kill himself again while waiting for his court date. Prison staff placed him on suicide watch. On July 21, 1989, Bert Hunter appeared in court before Judge Kinder. Hunter told the court he wanted to fire his lawyer. He wanted to represent himself. He wanted to plead guilty to all charges. He wanted to receive the death penalty. He said his life was not worth living. He said being strapped to the gurney for execution would be a blessing. The judge asked Hunter questions. Hunter said he understood his rights. He said he was giving them up on purpose. He said he had suicidal tendencies. The judge allowed Hunter to represent himself. Hunter then pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of first-degree robbery. The judge accepted the pleas. But during the plea hearing, the judge expressed doubts. The judge said the factual basis for Mildred Hodges' murder was a bit thin. The judge noted there was no indication of murder in the first degree concerning Mrs. Hodges. The judge questioned whether she had been killed deliberately. But the judge accepted the plea anyway because Hunter wanted it. After the plea was accepted, the judge ordered a second psychiatric evaluation. The first evaluation had not determined whether Hunter was competent. The second doctor, Dr. Sam Parwadikar, concluded that Hunter was mentally fit to plead guilty. Other doctors later disagreed. Dr. William O'Connor found that Hunter was suffering from major depression at the time of his plea. Dr. Lee Evans testified that Hunter's judgment was affected by depression and cocaine withdrawal. But the court relied on Dr. Parwadikar's opinion. On October 18, 1989, less than 3 months after pleading guilty, Hunter changed his mind. He filed a motion to withdraw his guilty pleas. He said he had been depressed and suicidal when he pleaded. He said his mental health was improving. He said he wanted a jury trial. He wanted to live. The court refused. On December 7, 1989, Judge Kinder overruled the motion. The judge said Hunter had knowingly and voluntarily pleaded guilty. The judge would not let him take it back. On February 15, 1990, Judge Kinder sentenced Bert Hunter to death on each of the 2 murder charges. He also received life in prison for the robbery charge. The death sentences were to be carried out. Hunter filed appeals. On April 25, 1990, he filed a motion for post-conviction relief. That motion was denied on July 24, 1991. On October 27, 1992, the Missouri Supreme Court affirmed Hunter's conviction and sentence. On June 28, 1993, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear his case. Hunter then filed a petition for a writ of habeas corpus in federal court. But on May 16, 1994, Hunter filed an affidavit saying he never wanted to appeal his death sentence. He said he did not authorize the lawsuit. He asked the court to dismiss it. The court did dismiss it. Later, other lawyers filed new petitions, but they were denied in 1995, 1996, and 1999. On January 24, 2000, the U.S. Supreme Court again declined to review his case. On May 24, 2000, the Missouri Supreme Court set June 28, 2000, as Hunter's execution date. Before the execution, Hunter sent a letter to the Missouri Supreme Court. He called them witch-burners. He dared them to set an execution date. He said he was tired of prison. The court set the date 7 days after receiving the letter. Governor Mel Carnahan reviewed a request for clemency. On June 27, 2000, the night before the execution, the governor denied clemency. The governor's spokesman said Hunter should pay the ultimate penalty for taking 2 innocent lives. On June 28, 2000, at 12:01 a.m., Burt Leroy Hunter was executed by lethal injection at the Potosi Correctional Center in Missouri. He was 53 years old. Witnesses observed the execution. His attorney, Cheryl Raffert, later reported that Hunter had violent convulsions during the procedure. She believed he was conscious and suffered pain. The state's execution protocol required 3 drugs: first to render unconscious, second to stop breathing, third to stop the heart. Raffert claimed the first drug did not work properly, but the execution was completed. Hunter was pronounced dead. Tomas Irvin, the accomplice, was also convicted of the murders. He received a death sentence as well. He was executed later in 2000. Both men died by lethal injection in Missouri for the murders of Mildred and Richard Hodges. After the case ended, the victims' family and community remembered Mildred Hodges, 75, and Richard Hodges, 49. They were innocent people killed in their own home for a small amount of money and valuables. The rumor about cash in the file cabinet was false. They died because 2 convicted murderers chose to rob them, and then chose to kill them to avoid being identified. Burt Hunter's body was returned to his family or handled by the state. His wife Deanna had divorced him or separated from him. He had no children mentioned in the records. His life ended on the gurney, the same death he had asked for 11 years earlier. The story of Burt Leroy Hunter is the story of a man who grew up in poverty, became a criminal as a teenager, spent most of his adult life in prison, learned computer skills, got a good job, lost everything to cocaine and depression, killed 2 people to avoid being caught, pleaded guilty because he wanted to die, tried to change his mind, and was executed by the state of Missouri on June 28, 2000. Story 4. Jesse Carlos San Miguel was born on September 5, 1971. He was born in the United States. His family was Mexican-American. Jesse grew up in Texas. When Jesse was a child, his home was not peaceful. There was domestic violence in the house. People who knew the family later said that Jesse was exposed to abuse during his childhood. His father was not around much. His mother raised him with little money. The family struggled. Jesse went to school in Texas. He went to junior high school and then to high school. He did not like school. His grades were very poor. He did not follow the rules. He started getting into fights with other students. He started many of those fights himself. One student who knew him, Mitchell McDearman, later said he saw Jesse in 18 different fights. Most of those fights were started by Jesse. Jesse enjoyed having a reputation. He liked that people thought he was tough and dangerous. He liked that no one picked on him. He wanted people to be afraid of him. When Jesse was 16 years old, he was accused of shooting another person. That person was a student. The incident happened when Jesse and another student were supposed to have a fight. The other student did not show up. A different student tried to start a fight with Jesse instead. Jesse pulled out a pistol and shot that student in the stomach. The student survived. In 1989, Jesse was stopped by police for speeding. The police found a revolver under his seat. The revolver had an 8-inch barrel. Jesse was arrested for unlawfully carrying a weapon. Also in 1989, Jesse stole a BMW car. He got the keys from someone in the car owner's household. He used the car for one night. Then he left it near his apartment. He signed a confession saying he took the car. The charges were reduced to a misdemeanor. He received 1 year of probation. Around the same time, police were called to a disturbance between two groups of males. Jesse was standing with members of a group called the Always Violent Boys. The police found that Jesse was carrying illegal brass knuckles. He was arrested again. Jesse also broke into houses. He told a friend named Adam Alvarez that he broke into houses mostly to steal weapons. Police later searched Jesse's room. They found a stolen shotgun and 2 stolen pistols. Several people said that items found in Jesse's apartment had been taken from their homes during burglaries. Jesse got a job at a store called Mervin's. He worked as a security guard. He was caught using his employee discount to buy things for other people. That was against the rules. He also confessed to stealing between $800 and $1,000 worth of goods from the store. He signed a paper promising to pay the money back. He never paid anything. At the time, he was still a teenager. He had been arrested 9 times already. He was free on bonds. The total amount of those bonds was $45,000. The charges against him included weapons violations and burglaries. He had not yet gone to trial for most of these charges. One night, Jesse was at a party. He was sitting next to his wife and another girl. A student was sitting nearby. Jesse grabbed that student. He shook him. He asked what the student was doing messing around with his wife. Then he threatened to kill the student. Later that night, when the student got home, he found 9 or 10 bullet holes in the wall of his bedroom. A neighbor saw a truck that looked like Jesse's truck drive by at the time of the shooting. Police found a spent shell near the student's house. When police talked to Jesse and his wife at their apartment, they saw a holster for a pistol, an empty magazine for an assault rifle, and ammunition for several types of weapons. Jesse told his friend Adam Alvarez that if he ever got caught for something, he wanted to go down for something big. He wanted everyone to know about it. Jesse never finished high school. He dropped out in the 10th grade. He did not have a steady job after that. He continued to get into fights and carry weapons. He was known to the police as someone who caused trouble. His violent behavior had started when he was young, and it had not stopped. On January 26, 1991, Jesse Carlos San Miguel was 19 years old. He had a friend named Jerome Green. Jerome was 17 years old. Jerome had worked part-time at a Taco Bell restaurant in Irving, Texas. Because of that job, Jerome knew how the restaurant worked. He knew when the store closed. He knew about the safe. He knew when employees took out the trash. Jesse and Jerome decided to rob that Taco Bell. They planned the robbery for a few weeks. They chose a time when the restaurant would be closed. They wanted to get in when only a few employees were inside. The restaurant was located in Irving, Texas. The assistant manager was a man named Michael John Phelan. He was 28 years old. He was white. On the night of January 25, 1991, Michael was working the late shift. 2 other employees were working that night. One was Teresa Fraga. She was 16 years old. She was pregnant at the time. The other employee was Frank Fraga. He was 23 years old. He was Teresa's cousin. Both Teresa and Frank were related. They had a friend named Sun Trang Nguyen. Sun was 35 years old. He had come to the restaurant to wait for Teresa and Frank to finish work. He was sitting in a vehicle outside. The restaurant closed for the night. The doors were locked. Inside, the employees were finishing their tasks. The safe had a time lock. That meant it could not be opened until a certain time. Jesse and Jerome waited outside in the dark. They wore ski masks. They wore gloves. They had a 9mm pistol. The pistol was semi-automatic. It was loaded with bullets. At some point, an employee opened the back door to take out the trash. That was the moment Jesse and Jerome had been waiting for. They went inside through the open door. They forced the assistant manager, Michael Phelan, to wait for the time-lock safe to open. They wanted the money inside. While they waited for the safe, they herded the people into the walk-in freezer. They put Teresa Fraga inside. They put Frank Fraga inside. Then they saw Sun Trang Nguyen sitting in the vehicle outside. They did not want him to call for help or run away. So they went outside and forced Sun into the freezer as well. All 4 victims were now locked inside the cold freezer. Jesse and Jerome took the money from the safe when it opened. They left the restaurant with the cash. They got into their car and drove away. But a few minutes later, Jesse decided to go back. He told the police later that he chose to return to the restaurant. He went back inside. He opened the freezer door where the 4 people were trapped. Jesse later told police what he did next. He said he asked the victims to give him a good reason why he should not kill them. Then he took out the 9mm pistol. He shot each person in the head at close range. Michael Phelan was shot twice. 1 bullet went into the back of his head. Sun Trang Nguyen was shot once. The bullet entered his neck and came out near his nose. Frank Fraga was shot twice in the back of the head. Teresa Fraga was shot twice in the back of the head. She was still pregnant. All 4 died inside the freezer. The blood was heavy on the floor. There was so much blood that later, when police arrived, they had to use a squeegee to find the empty bullet casings. After the shooting, Jesse left again. He got back into the car with Jerome Green. They drove away from the Taco Bell. They had the money. They had the gun. They still had the ski masks and gloves. What happened next inside the freezer is not known in detail. The 4 bodies lay there. No one inside the restaurant was alive to tell what happened after the shots were fired. After Jesse San Miguel and Jerome Green drove away from the Taco Bell, they did not get far. It was early morning on January 26, 1991. Police officers in Irving, Texas, saw their car. The officers thought the driver might be drunk. They pulled the car over about half a mile from the restaurant. The officers looked inside the car. They found 2 ski masks. They found 2 pairs of gloves. They found a paper bag from Taco Bell. The bag was stuffed with money. The total amount was $1,390. They also found a 9mm pistol. The pistol was empty except for 1 bullet. The gun smelled like it had been fired recently. The officers did not yet know about the shooting at the Taco Bell, but they saw the Taco Bell bag and the masks and gloves. They started calling nearby Taco Bell restaurants to see if any had been robbed. A short time later, police went to the Taco Bell where Jerome Green used to work. They entered the restaurant. They found the walk-in freezer. Inside, they found the 4 bodies. The first police officer who saw the bodies fainted. The blood was deep on the floor. Police had to use a squeegee to push the blood aside so they could find the empty bullet casings. Jesse San Miguel was arrested at the traffic stop. Jerome Green was also arrested. Police took Jesse to the station. There, he gave a confession. He told police that he robbed the Taco Bell. He said he waited outside until an employee opened the door. He said he forced the assistant manager to wait for the safe to open. He said he put the victims into the freezer. Then he said he went back and shot them. He said he asked them to give him a reason not to kill them, and then he shot each one in the head. 2 days later, Jesse gave another confession. It was similar to the first. The police also found blood on Jesse's shoes and shirt. That blood came from the victims. The bullets found in the victims' bodies matched the gun found in Jesse's car. Jesse was charged with capital murder. He was tried only for the murder of Michael John Phelan. The law in Texas allowed that because killing one person during a robbery could be capital murder. The other 3 deaths were used as evidence during the trial. At the trial, the prosecutor told the jury what happened. The jury heard Jesse's confession. They heard from witnesses. They saw the gun and the money and the masks. Jesse did not testify in his own defense. The jury found Jesse guilty of capital murder. Then the same jury had to decide if he would get death or life in prison. During this part of the trial, the jury heard about Jesse's past violence. They heard about the fights, the weapons, the burglaries, and the shooting of the student. They decided that Jesse would be dangerous in the future. They sentenced him to death. Jerome Green was 17 years old. Because of his age, he was not eligible for the death penalty. He made a deal with prosecutors. He pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to 50 years in prison. He became eligible for parole in 2004. Jesse San Miguel spent 9 years on death row. He filed many appeals. He asked the courts to stop his execution. He said his trial was unfair because of racial bias. He said his own lawyer and the prosecutor had used stereotypes about Mexican Americans. The courts reviewed his case, but did not give him a new trial. On June 29, 2000, Jesse Carlos San Miguel was executed by lethal injection in Huntsville, Texas. He was 28 years old. He made a final statement. He told his family to be strong. He said he loved them. He did not apologize to the families of his victims. 6 members of the victims' families watched him die. Teresa Fraga was 16 years old and pregnant when she was killed. Her baby did not survive. Her cousin Frank Fraga was 23. Son Trang Nguyen was 35. Michael John Phelan was 28. All 4 died inside the freezer of a Taco Bell because Jesse San Miguel decided to go back and shoot them after he already had the money. The story of Jesse Carlos San Miguel ends with his execution on June 29, 2000, but the 4 people he killed never returned to their families. Story 5. Michael David Clagett was born in 1961 in the United States. His mother was named Iris M. Etter. She lived in Ohio, near the city of Columbus. Michael grew up in that area. His family did not have a lot of money. They lived a simple, working-class life. When Michael was young, his parents did not stay together. His father left the family. His mother later married another man. Michael grew up with his mother and his stepfather. As a child, he did not get into serious trouble. He went to local schools. He was not known as a violent or strange child. He was just like many other boys in his neighborhood. After finishing school, Michael did not go to college. He worked different jobs to earn money. He did not stay in one job for a long time. As a young man, he started using drugs. He also drank alcohol often. These habits became a normal part of his daily life. Michael also had trouble with his temper. He got married to a woman at some point, but the marriage was not happy. He was violent toward his wife. He hurt her more than once. The violence was brutal. His wife finally left him because she was afraid. Their marriage ended in divorce. After the divorce, Michael kept using drugs and drinking. He did not have a stable home. He moved around. At some point, he left Ohio and went to Virginia. He ended up in Virginia Beach, a city near the ocean. He lived there without a clear plan. He still looked for work, but did not hold jobs for long. In Virginia Beach, Michael met a woman named Denise R. Halsinger. Denise worked as a waitress at a place called the Witch Duck Inn. The Witch Duck Inn was a tavern and restaurant. Denise and Michael became boyfriend and girlfriend. They spent a lot of time together. They both used drugs and drank alcohol heavily. They would often go on long binges where they did not sleep for days. Michael was 33 years old at this time. Denise was also in her 30s. Michael had a gun. He kept it with him. He did not have a legal reason to carry it. He simply owned it. Denise knew about the gun. She did not stop him from keeping it. Denise liked her job at the Witch Duck Inn at first. But then something changed. The owner of the inn, a man named Lam Van Son, fired Denise from her waitress job. Denise was very angry about this. She told Michael about it. She said she wanted to get back at the owner. Michael listened to her. But at this point, no crime had been planned yet. Michael and Denise stayed together. They continued their drug and alcohol use. Michael had a history of violent behavior with women. He had hurt his ex-wife. Now he was with Denise. Their relationship was not healthy. They argued. They used drugs. They made each other more angry and more unstable. This was Michael Claget's life before anything else happened. He was a man who grew up in Ohio without a father. He did not finish college. He had a violent marriage that ended. He moved to Virginia Beach. He met Denise. He used drugs and drank too much. He had a gun. Denise lost her job. And they stayed together, angry and high, not knowing what would come next. Denise had been fired from her waitress job at the Witch Duck Inn. She was angry. Michael had a gun. Both of them used drugs and drank alcohol heavily. In late June 1994, Denise and Michael went on a long binge. For 2 days, they used drugs and drank alcohol without stopping. They did not sleep. Their minds were not clear. During this binge, Denise kept talking about the Witch Duck Inn. She told Michael she wanted revenge against the owner, Lam Van Son, for firing her. She said they should rob the inn. She wanted to take money from the cash register. Denise pushed Michael to agree. While they were having sex, she convinced him. She told him they would be like Bonnie and Clyde, the famous criminals from the past. Michael agreed to help her. He had a .357 Magnum handgun. That was the tool they would use. The date was June 30th, 1994. Michael and Denise went to the Witch Duck Inn in Virginia Beach. They arrived at night. The inn was a tavern and restaurant. There were people inside. Here is who was inside that night. Lam Van Son, age 41. He was the owner of the inn. He was the one who had fired Denise. Karen Sue Rounds, age 31. She was a waitress. She had been hired to replace Denise after Denise was fired. Wendell G. J.R. Parrish Jr., age 32. He was the cook and handyman. Abdelaziz Gren, age 34. He was a customer. He was just there eating or drinking. Also in the building was Lam Van Son's 5-year-old son. The boy was asleep in a back room. He did not see anything. Michael and Denise entered the inn. Michael had the .357 Magnum gun in his hand. Denise went straight to the cash register. Her job was to take the money. Michael's job was to shoot people so no one could stop them. Michael shot each victim 1 time in the head. He shot Lam Van Son in the forehead. He shot the other 3, Karen Sue Rounds, Wendell Parrish, and Abdelaziz Gren, in the back of the head. Each victim died immediately. The shots were fired close to their heads. There was no struggle. The victims did not have time to run or fight back. While Michael was shooting, Denise opened the cash register. She took out the money. The total amount was about $400. That was all they got from the robbery. After the shooting, Michael and Denise left the inn. They did not check the back room. They did not know the little boy was there. The boy slept through the whole thing and was not hurt. Michael and Denise went back to where they were staying. Michael had $137 on him when he was later arrested. The rest of the money was likely spent or given to Denise. The bodies stayed inside the inn. No one found them until later that night or early the next morning. A regular customer named Richard T. Reed came to the Witch Duck Inn around midnight. He walked in and saw the bodies. He saw 4 people on the floor. He saw the cash register was open and empty. He He called the police. At this point, the police had not yet identified the killer. But someone would soon give them a name. That someone was Denise Halsinger. Denise decided to tell the police that Michael was the shooter. She named him as a suspect. She did not tell them she helped plan the robbery or that she took the money. She pointed at Michael to save herself. Meanwhile, Michael did not run away. He stayed in Virginia Beach. On July 1st, 1994, one day after the murders, a citizen called the police. The citizen reported that a man was sleeping in some bushes. Police officer Donna Malcolm went to check. She found Michael Clagett. He was drunk and high. She arrested him for public intoxication. That is a minor crime. She took him to the police station. At the station, Detective Paul C. Yoakum took over. The detective asked Michael about the witch duck and killings. Michael first said he was not there. Then the detective lied to Michael. He said the inn had security cameras. He said the police could prove Michael was inside. That was not true, but Michael believed it. Then Michael confessed. He said, "You can fry me. I did it. I did it all." He said Denise was not the shooter. He said he shot every one of them. He described where he shot each person. He also said Denise had asked him to do it. She had told him to shoot while she took the cash. Later that same day, while still in police custody, Michael talked to a television news reporter from WTKR Channel 3. The reporter asked, "Are you guilty of these charges?" Michael said, "Yes. I shot every one of them." The police now had 2 confessions from Michael. They also had Denise's statement naming him. They arrested Michael for the murders. Denise was also later arrested when police learned she was inside the inn during the robbery. The 4 victims were dead. Their families were told what happened. Lam Van Son left behind a wife named Lana Lu Sun and a 5-year-old son named Joshua Lee Sun. Karen Sue Rounds left behind a husband named Kevin Rounds. Wendell Parrish left behind his family. Abdelaziz Gren left behind sisters and other relatives. Michael Clagett had committed 4 murders during a robbery that took only $400. The crime was over, but the legal process had not yet begun. After Michael Clagett confessed to Detective Paul C. Yoakum and later to a television news reporter, the police had enough evidence to charge him. Denise Halsinger had already named Michael as the shooter. The police also found a .357 Magnum gun in Michael's home on the morning of July 2, 1994. A crime lab analyst tried to match bullet fragments from the inn to that gun. The analyst could not make a perfect match, but the gun was the same type Michael said he used. The police also had Michael's own words describing exactly how and where he shot each victim. On October 3, 1994, a grand jury returned 2 indictments against Michael Clagett. The first indictment charged him with robbery, use of a firearm during a robbery, 4 counts of capital murder for killing people during a robbery, and 4 counts of using a firearm to commit murder. The second indictment charged him with 1 count of multiple homicide capital murder, meaning he killed 4 people as part of the same event. Michael went to trial. The trial lasted 10 days. The prosecution presented the 2 videotaped confessions. They also showed that Michael and Denise were seen with a gun on the day of the killings. A medical examiner testified that 3 victims were shot in the back of the head and 1 was shot in the forehead. The cash register at the inn was empty after the killings. When Michael was arrested, he had $137 on him. Denise Halsinger did not testify at the trial. The jury found Michael Clagett guilty of all charges in both indictments. Then came the sentencing hearing on July 12th and 13th, 1995. The jury heard evidence about Michael's past. They learned he had a history of brutal domestic violence against his ex-wife. They also learned he used drugs. But they also heard that he showed great remorse when he confessed to Detective Yoakum. Despite that remorse, the jury sentenced him to death. He received 5 death sentences. On July 13, 1995, he was formally sentenced. He went to death row. Denise Halsinger was also convicted. She pleaded guilty to murder and robbery. She received 5 life terms in prison plus 23 more years. She was 35 years old at the time of her sentencing. Michael Clagett appealed his case. He took it to the Supreme Court of Virginia. On appeal, the court found that one of his convictions, the multiple homicide capital murder charge, was too similar to the other charges. The court vacated that one conviction, but the court affirmed the other 4 capital murder convictions and the 4 death sentences. Michael then tried to raise other issues. He said his confession should have been thrown out because his mind was foggy from alcohol and lack of sleep. The court rejected that claim. He also said the jurors were not told that he would never get parole if they gave him life in prison. The court rejected that too. The Supreme Court of Virginia ruled against him in 1996. Michael then appealed to federal court. He filed a habeas corpus petition, which is a request to be released because of unfair treatment. The Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals heard his case. They ruled against him in 2000. He then asked the United States Supreme Court to stop his execution. The Supreme Court turned down his final appeal and his request for a stay. Michael did not ask Virginia Governor Jim Gilmore for clemency, which is mercy or a reduced sentence. Virginia gave death row inmates a choice between lethal injection and the electric chair. Michael chose the electric chair. He was the second person in Virginia to make that choice since the law changed in 1995. On July 6, 2000, Michael David Clagett was executed at the Greensville Correctional Center in Virginia. He was 39 years old. Before he died, he wept and gave a final statement. He apologized to the families of his victims. He was strapped into the electric chair. The first jolt was 1,825 volts of electricity at 7.5 amps for 30 seconds. His body stiffened. Then there was a 5-second pause. The second jolt was 240 volts at 1.5 amps for 60 seconds. After that, a doctor put a stethoscope to Michael's heart. The doctor pronounced him dead at 9:08 p.m. Witnesses watched from a viewing room. The victims' families were there. One woman cried. Others said they felt relief. Jim Garcia, brother-in-law of victim Abdelaziz Gren, said all his anger went away when Michael died. But Fatna Garcia, the victim's sister, said the execution did not bring her brother back. Khadija Johnson, another sister of Abdelaziz Gren, said she felt a sense of relief. Lana Lusun, the widow of owner Lam Van Sun, forgave Michael in a phone call approved by the governor. But she also said the execution was easier for Michael than for her. Michael's mother, Iris M. Etter, was at the prison with Michael's wife. Michael had married his first cousin, Karen Elaine Sparks, in a jailhouse wedding in 1996. His mother said it was wrong for the state to kill her son. She said Michael had found peace. Michael's ashes were returned to his mother after the autopsy. Denise Halsinger remained in prison. She was serving 5 life terms plus 23 years. She became eligible for parole on July 19, 2011. Lana Sun promised to appear at the parole board to oppose her release. Denise also later tried to get part of her ex-husband's Navy retirement pay. She was divorced from Randall Halsinger, a Navy petty officer. She filed papers seeking a share of his monthly retirement check. That case was referred to a divorce commissioner. The 4 victims, Lam Van Sun, Karen Sue Rounds, Wendell G. Parrish Jr., and Abdelaziz Gren, never returned to their families. Their families carried the loss for the rest of their lives. The final sentence. Michael David Clagett died in Virginia's electric chair on July 6, 2000, and Denise Halsinger remained in prison while the victims' families continued to grieve. Story 6. Orion Cecil Joyner was born on October 27, 1949, in Macon, Georgia. His family called him OC for short. He grew up in Macon. His family did not have a lot of money. They lived a simple, ordinary life. As a child, Orion went to school. He learned to read and write. He finished his basic education. After that, he did not go to college for a long time. Instead, he learned a trade. He learned how to drive large trucks. When Orion became a young man, he worked as a long-haul trucker. This meant he drove trucks for many hours across different states. He would pick up goods from one place and deliver them to another. The job kept him away from home for days, or even weeks at a time. Later, Orion started his own small trucking business. The business was not big. He had only a few trucks. At some point, he decided to move his business from North Carolina to Texas. He made this move because Texas had lower taxes. He wanted to keep more of his money. He later told people that greed brought him to Texas. Orion met a woman named Kathleen. They began a relationship. In time, they got married. Kathleen became his wife. They had a son together. The son's name was James. The family lived together in an apartment in Lubbock, Texas. Orion had certain habits. One important habit was that he carried a knife with him every day. It was not a small pocket knife. It was a larger knife that could open. He kept this knife in his right rear pocket at all times. He took the knife with him wherever he went. Orion also had a quick temper. People who knew him saw this. He got angry very fast. When he was angry, he would sometimes threaten people with his knife. He did this on multiple occasions. His marriage to Kathleen was not peaceful. There were problems. In 1985, one incident happened in a laundry room. Kathleen was doing laundry. She left to use the bathroom. When she came back, Orion did not believe her. He accused her of lying. While she was holding their young son, Orion hit her in the stomach with his fist. The hit was so hard that she fell to her knees. A worker in the building heard the noise and came to check. A few months later, another incident happened. The couple's son, James, was young. He was playing and tickling Orion while Orion was sleeping. Orion woke up. He grabbed the boy by his hair and threw him off the mattress. Kathleen slapped Orion and told him to leave James alone. In response, Orion pulled out his knife. He threatened her and said, "Don't ever hit me again." By late 1986, the marriage was falling apart. Shortly after Thanksgiving that year, Orion and Kathleen agreed to separate. Kathleen moved to her own apartment with their son. Orion remained in another apartment. They were no longer living together as husband and wife. Around this same time, Orion began having emotional problems. His mental state became unstable. About 4 weeks before the end of the year, he was admitted to a hospital for these emotional problems. He stayed there for some time. The doctors tried to help him, but he was released after a short period. On a Sunday in December 1986, just a few days before Christmas, Orion went to Kathleen's apartment without being invited. She let him inside. Once he was in, he closed the door and pulled out his knife. He put the knife to her throat. He told her not to scream. He said he would kill her right there. Then he punched her in the face twice. He cut her sweater off. He forced her to take off her pants. He punched her many more times that night. He hit her face, chest, stomach, and ribs. At one point, he tried to strangle her. He kept saying that he ought to kill her. He forced her to call in sick to work the next day. He kept her and their son inside the apartment all day Monday. By Tuesday morning, Kathleen convinced Orion that she would not call the police. She promised that they would get back together. Orion believed her. He let her go to work with their son. Kathleen did not return until Wednesday evening. When she came back, she brought a female friend and 2 police officers. She only came to get her clothes and her son's clothes. She did not return to live with Orion again. That was the state of Orion Cecil Joyner's life in December 1986. He was 37 years old. He had a violent temper. He carried a knife every day. His marriage had ended. He had been in a hospital for emotional problems only weeks earlier, and he had just held his estranged wife at knife point for 2 days. On December 17th, 1986, 2 women lived in an apartment in Lubbock, Texas. Their names were Carol Lynette Huckabee and Eva Marie DeForest. Carol was 26 years old. Eva was 29 years old. Both women worked as waitresses. They shared the same apartment. They were roommates and neighbors to Orion Cecil Joyner. Joyner lived in the apartment right next door. That night, an intruder entered the women's apartment. The intruder brought a roll of duct tape. He also brought a knife. The knife was the same type of knife that Joyner carried with him every day. The intruder used the duct tape to bind both women. He wrapped the tape around their wrists and ankles so they could not move or fight back. Once the women were bound, the intruder attacked Carol Huckabee first. He raped her. Then he stabbed her many times. The knife went into her chest. It went into her back. It went into her face. After all the stabbing, he took the knife and slashed her throat. Then the intruder turned to Eva DeForest. He did not rape her, but he beat her. He hit her in the forehead with force. The blow was hard enough to cause blunt force trauma. Then he stabbed her. He stabbed her 41 times. Many of those stabs went into her face. After he finished stabbing her, he cut her throat as well. The knife blade broke during the attack. One piece of the broken blade was left sticking out of Eva's chest. When the intruder was done, both women were dead. They died inside their own apartment. The duct tape was still on their bodies. The knife blade remained in Eva's chest. After the murders, someone left the apartment. That someone was Orion Cecil Joyner. He went back to his own apartment next door. But he did not stay there. Later, he made a phone call to the police. He told them he had discovered 2 dead women. The police arrived at the apartment complex. Joyner met them. He gave them a story. He said that he had looked through a window of the women's apartment. He said he saw bloody bodies inside. He said he then put his fist through the window to reach inside and open the door. After that, he said, he called the police. Then Joyner told the police another part of his story. He said that when he looked through the window, he saw 2 men running away from the back of the women's apartment. He said the 2 men escaped by jumping over a fence in the backyard. He described the men as black. He said they were running away when he saw them. The police went to the backyard to check. They looked at the fence. They looked at the ground around the fence. The ground was muddy. If 2 men had jumped over the fence, their feet would have left footprints in the mud. But the police found no footprints at all. There were no marks in the mud. There were no signs that anyone had jumped over that fence. At the same time, another resident of the apartment complex came forward. This person lived in the same building. He told the police that he had seen Joyner near the women's apartment on the night of the murder. He said Joyner had blood on his shirt. He also said blood was dripping from Joyner's hand. The police looked at Joyner. They noticed that he had cuts on his right hand. He also had cuts on his fingers. The cuts were fresh. They looked like they came from a knife. 2 days after the murders, police took pictures of Joyner. The pictures showed the cuts on his right hand and fingers. The pictures also showed bloodstains on the clothes he had been wearing on the day of the murders. The police took Joyner's shirt. They examined the bloodstains on it. They found one stain that matched Carol Huckabee's blood type. They found another stain that matched Eva DeForest's blood type. The blood on his shirt came from both dead women. Police also took Joyner's shoes. There was blood on the shoes as well. Joyner later said that the blood got there when he and a police officer walked through the apartment. But the police noted that he had blood on his shoes before they entered the apartment together. Joyner continued to talk to the police. He gave them his version of events. But his story changed. He said one thing at first. Then he said something different. His statements did not match. The police noticed these differences. For example, Joyner first said he saw 2 men running away. Then he gave different details about how he found the bodies. The police compared his words and found contradictions. They also found that his story did not match the physical evidence, such as the missing footprints in the mud. At this point, the police had not yet arrested Joyner. They had not begun a full investigation. They had only collected initial evidence. They had a witness who saw Joyner with blood on his shirt. They had blood on Joyner's clothing that matched both victims. They had fresh cuts on his hand. They had a broken knife blade left at the scene. And they had a suspect who lived right next door to the murdered women. But the police knew they needed more. They did not immediately charge Joyner. They continued to ask questions. Joyner continued to give answers. His answers did not stay the same. Each new conversation with police created more differences in his story. One other thing happened during this time. Joyner was placed in the Lubbock County Jail. He was not yet arrested for the murders. He was being held for other reasons related to the attack on his wife. While he was in jail, he made a phone call to Kathleen. He asked her if she was going to file for divorce. She said yes. Joyner then threatened to have both her and her son killed. The murders of Carol Huckabee and Eva Marie DeForest were done. The evidence was pointing to one person. That person was the man who lived next door. That person was the one who had blood on his shirt. That person was the one who gave changing stories. That person was Orion Cecil Joyner. But the formal investigation had not yet begun. After the police collected the initial evidence, they began a formal investigation. The lead investigator looked at all the facts. The witness from the apartment complex had seen Joyner with blood on his shirt and dripping from his hand. The blood on Joyner's shirt matched both women. The cuts on Joyner's right hand matched the kind of cuts a person gets when a knife slips during stabbing. There were no footprints behind the fence, which meant Joyner's story about two men running away was false. The police also looked at the broken knife blade left in Eva DeForest's chest. They did not find the rest of the knife at the crime scene. But they knew Joyner carried a knife every day. They asked Joyner about his knife. He could not produce it. The knife was missing. The police arrested Orion Cecil Joyner for the murders of Carol Huckabee and Eva DeForest. He was taken to jail. The date of his arrest was in late December 1986 or early January 1987. He was formally charged with 2 counts of capital murder. The case went to trial in April 1988. The trial took place in Lubbock County, Texas. The prosecutor was Travis Ware. The jury was made up of ordinary citizens. They had to listen to all the evidence and decide if Joyner was guilty. The prosecution called many witnesses. One witness was the neighbor who saw Joyner with blood on his shirt. That neighbor told the jury exactly what he saw on the night of December 17, 1986. Another witness was a police officer who took pictures of Joyner's hands and clothing 2 days after the murders. The officer showed the jury the cuts on Joyner's fingers and the blood stains. A forensic expert testified about the blood tests. The expert told the jury that one blood stain on Joyner's shirt came from Carol Huckabee. Another blood stain came from Eva DeForest. The expert also testified that the blood on Joyner's shoes matched the victims. The prosecution also called Kathleen Gustafson, Joyner's estranged wife. She testified about Joyner's violent behavior. She told the jury about the night of December 14, 1986, when Joyner held her at knife point, punched her, and threatened to kill her. She testified about the 1985 incidents, including the laundry room punch and the threat after he threw his son. The jury heard that Joyner carried a knife every day and used it to threaten people. Other witnesses were called. Pat Fink, who worked with Joyner, testified that Joyner had a quick and violent temper. Fink said he saw Joyner threaten people with his knife 4 or 5 times. Ernest Denman, Joyner's former employer, testified that Joyner pulled his knife on a group of workers. Denman also said Joyner threatened to cut off facial features like a nose or ear. The defense tried to argue that Joyner was innocent. Joyner himself said he found the bodies and saw 2 men running away. but the physical evidence did not support his story. The lack of footprints in the mud was a key fact. The jury also heard that Joyner's statements to police changed over time. That made him seem untrustworthy. The jury deliberated. They discussed the evidence. They decided that Orion Cecil Joyner was guilty of capital murder for killing 2 people. The date of the verdict was in April 1988. The same jury then decided on the punishment. Texas law allowed the death penalty for capital murder. The jury voted for death. Joyner was sentenced to be executed by lethal injection. After the sentence, Joyner was sent to death row. He was received by the Texas Department of Criminal Justice on May 26, 1988. He spent the next 12 years appealing his case. Joyner filed appeals in state and federal courts. On March 18, 1992, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals denied his motion for a rehearing. On June 28, 1993, the United States Supreme Court denied his petition for a writ of certiorari. That meant the Supreme Court refused to hear his case. Joyner continued to file appeals. On June 11, 1998, the trial court entered findings of fact and recommended that his filings be denied. On September 16, 1998, the Court of Criminal Appeals denied relief. On March 2, 1999, a federal district court denied relief and affirmed Joyner's conviction. On April 6, 1999, the district court denied permission to appeal. On November 30, 1999, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals denied permission to appeal. On April 3, 2000, the United States Supreme Court again denied a writ of certiorari. Joyner did not file a clemency petition with the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles. He did not ask the governor to spare his life. He told people he was ready to die. On July 12, 2000, the execution was scheduled to take place after 6 p.m. at the Huntsville unit in Huntsville, Texas. Joyner was 50 years old. He was led into the execution chamber. He was strapped to a table. A needle was placed in his arm. Before the lethal drugs were given, Joyner was allowed to make a final statement. He spoke for less than 2 minutes. He said, "As I've said since the very first thing, I am innocent of this crime. And God knows I'm innocent, and the poor people that was murdered knows I am innocent. And when I get to heaven, I'll be meeting you and we'll all talk." He also said he did not have hard feelings toward anyone. He said he felt sorry for the families of the victims. He said that if his death made them feel happy, he would bless them. The lethal injection was started at 6:11 p.m. Joyner mouthed the words, "I love you," to someone in the viewing room. Then he gasped, coughed, and closed his eyes. He was pronounced dead at 6:17 p.m. After the execution, the bodies of Carol Huckabee and Eva DeForest remained buried. Their families continued to live with the loss. Joyner's body was returned to his family for burial. He was executed as the 25th person put to death in Texas in the year 2000, and the 224th person executed in Texas since the death penalty was brought back in 1976. The case was closed. The 2 waitresses were murdered by the man who lived next door, and the state of Texas carried out his death sentence as punishment for his crimes. Story 7. Greg Francis Braun was born on March 8, 1961. He was born in the United States. His family lived in Garden City, Kansas. His father was Leland Braun. Leland Braun was a prominent lawyer in Garden City. The Braun family had a good reputation in their town. They were known and respected by many people. Greg grew up with advantages that other children did not have. His family had money. His father had a successful career. Greg did not want for basic needs like food, clothing, or a safe home. He went to good schools in Garden City. He had the opportunity to build a stable life. When Greg was young, he started to have problems. He began using drugs. He also started running with the wrong crowd. The people he spent time with were not a good influence on him. His father, Leland Braun, later said that Greg had his troubles with drugs. Leland Braun also said that Greg ran with the wrong group of people. Despite these problems, Greg continued his education. He went to college. He worked hard enough to earn a degree. His degree was in criminal justice. This meant he studied the legal system, police work, and how crimes are investigated. He learned about the very things that would later become central to his life in a different way. After college, Greg did not seem to have a clear path. He continued to struggle. At some point, he went to live with his parents again. His father later said that Greg seemed ready to get his life on track when he came home to live with them. From the outside, it looked like he might be trying to change. He was staying with family. He was not in trouble with the law at that moment, but his past habits of drug use and bad friends remained a part of his history. That was the life Greg Braun had before anything else happened. He was a man from a good family. He had a degree. He also had a history of drug use and bad choices in friends. He was living with his parents in Garden City, Kansas, as the summer of 1989 began. At the start of July 1989, Greg Braun was living with his parents in Garden City, Kansas. He was 28 years old. On July 19, 1989, he decided to commit a robbery. He went to a convenience store in Garden City. At that store, a woman named Barbara Cockendorfer was working. Barbara was 27 years old. Braun robbed the store. Then he did not just leave. He kidnapped Barbara Cockendorfer from her workplace. He took her away from the store. He drove her to a rural road outside of town. On that road, he shot her in the head. He used a .25 caliber handgun. Then he left her body in a ditch by the side of the road. After he killed Barbara, Braun later told police that he felt he had to kill again. So later on that same day, July 19, 1989, he went to another convenience store in Garden City. This store was on the opposite side of town. At that store, a woman named Mary Raines was working. Mary was 28 years old. Braun robbed the store. Then he kidnapped Mary Raines as well. He took her from her workplace. He drove her to a rural road. This road was about 3 miles away from where he had left Barbara's body. He shot Mary Raines in the head with the same .25 caliber handgun. Then he left her body in another ditch. Both women were mothers. Barbara left behind 5 young children. Mary left behind 3 young children. The next day, July 20th, 1989, Braun traveled to Pampa, Texas. In Pampa, there was a 1-hour photo processing shop. The owner of that shop was a man named Pete Spurrier. He was 54 years old. Braun went into the shop. He robbed the store. Then he shot Pete Spurrier in the head with the .25 caliber handgun. Pete Spurrier died at the scene. On July 21st, 1989, Braun went to Ardmore, Oklahoma. He went to a flower shop called Dodson's Flower Shop. At that flower shop, 3 women were inside. One was Gwendolyn Sue Miller. She was 31 years old. She was working at the shop. Another was Joan Bean. She also worked there. The third was Mary Manning. She was a customer. Braun pulled out his .25 caliber handgun. He forced all 3 women to lie face down on the floor. Then he shot each of them in the back of the head. Gwendolyn Sue Miller died from her wound. Joan Bean and Mary Manning did not die. They were both wounded, but they survived. After the shooting, Braun took money. He stole $80 from the flower shop register. He also stole $600 from one of the women. Then he left. 2 days later, on July 23, 1989, Braun went to Springer, New Mexico. He went to a convenience store. A woman named Geraldine Valdez was working there. She was 48 years old. Braun robbed the store. Then he shot Geraldine Valdez twice in the head with his .25 caliber handgun. She died. This was the 5th murder in 5 days. All 5 victims had been shot in the back of the head with the same type of gun. After the murder in New Mexico, Braun left the store. He was caught by police just 40 minutes later. When police stopped him, the handgun was still in his car. When officers arrested him, Braun made a statement. He said, "You guys must be proud. You don't know what kind of famous criminal you caught." Later, he told a deputy that his killing spree wasn't as good as shooting craps in Vegas, but it was all right. After Greg Braun was arrested in New Mexico on July 23, 1989, the police in other states began to connect the murders. At first, another man had been arrested for the Oklahoma murder. That man was Michael Frank Green. He was arrested on July 23, 1989 in Lawton, Oklahoma. One of the survivors from the Ardmore Flower Shop shooting had identified Green from a photo lineup. But within hours of Green's arrest, Braun was caught in New Mexico. Braun told New Mexico police that he was involved in the murder of Gwendolyn Sue Miller in Oklahoma. On July 26, 1989, the murder charge against Michael Frank Green was dropped. By August 3, 1989, Braun became the primary suspect in all 5 murders. The 2 in Kansas, the 1 in Texas, the 1 in Oklahoma, and the 1 in New Mexico. On August 18, 1989, Braun was formally charged with first-degree murder for killing Gwendolyn Sue Miller in Oklahoma. While that charge moved forward, other states handled their cases first. In April 1990, Braun pleaded guilty but mentally ill to the murder of Geraldine Valdez in New Mexico. The jury could not agree on a sentence. In September 1991, the judge sentenced Braun to life in prison for that murder. He would have to serve at least 36.5 years before he could be considered for parole. Next, Kansas prosecuted Braun for the murders of Barbara Cockendorfer and Mary Raines. He also faced robbery charges. Braun was sentenced to 4 life sentences and 2 sentences of 15 years to life. The court ordered that all these sentences must be served one after the other. This meant Braun would have to live past 100 years old to ever be eligible for parole. In August 1993, Braun faced the Oklahoma charge for the murder of Gwendolyn Sue Miller. He chose to plead no contest. This meant he did not fight the charges, but he also did not admit guilt. He made no deal with the prosecutor. This is called a blind plea. The judge, Thomas Walker, had the freedom to choose any sentence. On August 23, 1993, Judge Walker sentenced Greg Braun to death by lethal injection. Braun's lawyers tried to withdraw the plea 4 days later. The judge refused. For the next 7 years, Braun's legal team filed appeals. They argued that Braun had mental illness, specifically borderline personality disorder. His father, Leland Braun, tried to have his son sent back to New Mexico to serve the life sentence there instead of facing execution. New Mexico courts rejected this request. The case went to the U.S. Supreme Court. On the day of the execution, the Supreme Court denied Braun's final appeal. On June 27, 2000, the Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board held a clemency hearing for Braun. He did not attend. His lawyers presented his mental illness as a reason for mercy. The board voted 4-0 against recommending clemency. The governor did not stop the execution. On July 20, 2000, at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester, Greg Braun was prepared for execution. He was 39 years old. He asked for a last meal. He requested a chef salad with Italian dressing, barbecue beef or pork, and a hot fudge brownie sundae. He asked his family not to witness his death. He requested only one witness, a Catholic priest named Reverend Chi Peter Fung. 39 family members of his 5 victims came to witness the execution. 12 of them watched from a viewing room inside the death chamber. The other 27 watched on closed-circuit television in a nearby room. Just before he died, Braun gave a final statement. He named each of his 5 victims in the order he killed them. He said, "I'm sorry I murdered you. I'm sorry I took your lives. He apologized to the families of the victims and to his own family. He said, "What I did was unforgivable, but I ask you to forgive me." He also said, "I'm not an animal. I'm so sorry." At 12:11 a.m., the lethal injection began. At 12:17 a.m. on July 20th, 2000, Greg Francis Braun was pronounced dead. The 5 victims remained dead. Their families were left to live with the loss forever.